Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
Good morning. I'm Amy Morris.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Here are the stories we're following today.
Karen, we begin with politics. The crucial week for President Biden as he looks to recover following his disastrous debate performance with Donald Trump and reassure voters that he can surmount a lead and beat Trump in November's presidential election. Despite growing calls for Biden to step aside, the president vows to stay in the race. Now, over the weekend, he spoke with ABC's George Stephanopoulos in an exclusive interview, insisting that he is sharp enough to do the job for another term.
I have a cognitive test every single day. Every day I have that test. Everything I do. You know, not only am I campaigning, but I'm running the world.
Would you be willing to have the independent medical evaluation?
Watch me there's a lot of time left in this campaign.
And President Biden did not entertain the possibility of leaving the race, despite growing calls for him to do so.
If you are told reliably from your allies, from your friends and supporters in the Democratic Party, in the House and the Senate, that they're concerned you're going to lose the House and the Senate if you stay in, what will you do?
I'm not going to answer that question.
The president did tell ABC's George Stephanopoulos, though he is hearing discontent in the Democratic Party through the press.
Well, Amy, despite Biden's defiance, several influential Democrats spoke privately yesterday on a virtual call organized by House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries. And they say they want Biden to step aside as the party's nominee. Sources tell Bloomberg the latest defections include several Democratic leaders of House committees, including Jerry Nadler and Joe Morell of New York. In total, 9 House Democrats have called for Biden to step aside. Publicly, many Democrats continue to support the president, including California Representative Adam Schiff, who says he understands voter concerns, but has no doubt Biden will do the right thing for the country.
The performance on the debate stage, I think, rightfully raised questions among the American people about whether the president has the vigor to defeat Donald Trump. And this is an existential race. Given Joe Biden's incredible record, given Donald Trump's terrible record, he should be mopping the floor with Donald Trump.
And Adam Schiff made those comments on NBC's Meet the Press.
And despite pressure from donors and from the party, President Biden registered his best showing yet as he closes the gap on current frontrunner Republican Donald Trump. That's according to a Bloomberg News Morning Consult tracking poll of battleground states. Trump led Biden by only 2 percentage points, 47% to 45%, in the critical states needed to win the November election, which marks the smallest gap since the poll began last October. However, Bloomberg News political director Jody Schneider says Biden is farthest behind in one critical state.
The swing state poll that does show Biden trailing the most in Pennsylvania, down by 7 points, and that's going to be very problematic for him if he can't start making up some of that gap.
Bloomberg's Jody Schneider says the poll is the first comprehensive survey of states most likely to decide the election since the debate on June 27th.
Well, over in Europe, Amy, European stocks edged higher and the euro paired a decline along with French bonds as traders digested the unexpected result of France's snap election. A surprise win by a left-wing coalition in the country's parliamentary elections could send France into political gridlock. The new Popular Front won the most seats in Sunday's vote, but was around 100 short of a majority. National Rally Party leader Marine Le Pen says the outcome will hurt France.
France is going to be totally deadlocked with 3 groups of roughly equal size in the National Assembly. So that's the way to go. It's unfortunate we will lose another year of illegal immigration, another year of purchasing power loss, another year of insecurity exploding in our country.
The right-wing National Rally's Marine Le Pen, speaking there through an interpreter, her party won 143 seats, while President Emmanuel Macron's allies secured 156, and the new Popular Front got 178.
Meanwhile, in the Middle East, Iran has elected former health minister Masoud Pezeshkian as president, beating a hardline rival in a runoff vote. Although the U.S. State Department called the election not free or fair, the newly elected president is widely expected to seek improved relations with the West amid high tensions with Iran's involvement in the Israel-Hamas war. His predecessor was killed in a helicopter crash in May, triggering the election to replace him.
Well, back in the U.S., Amy, there's more trouble for Boeing as the plane maker agrees to plead guilty to criminal conspiracy. And Bloomberg's John Tucker has the details. John, good morning.
And Karen, the guilty plea comes in connection with two fatal crashes of its 737 MAX 5 years ago. Under the deal with prosecutors, Boeing faces a criminal fine close to $500 million. In addition, Boeing would be placed under tight external supervision for years to come. The agreement also has the potential to complicate Boeing's interaction with the government as a major defense contractor. The Justice Department determined back in May that Boeing breached a deferred prosecution tied to those crashes. That followed the blowout of a door panel on a 737 MAX 9. The latest agreement being bitterly criticized by families of the crash victims who were not consulted before it was unveiled. John Tucker, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, John, thank you. And elsewhere on the company news front, Paramount Global has agreed to merge with Skydance Media in a deal that hands control of the storied Hollywood studio to producer David Ellison. Paramount Chair Sherry Redstone agreed to sell her family's National Amusements Incorporated, which controls about 77% of the voting stock in Paramount, for $2.4 billion.
Well, Amy, let's turn to the markets now. Futures retreating following last week's rally, with Fed Chair Jerome Powell set to testify before Congress beginning tomorrow. I would call futures little change to lower right now. Traders are looking to solidify bets that policy easing could begin as early as September. Investors will also be following some other key eco headlines this week. On Thursday, we get the latest consumer price index reading and PPI the next day, and earnings from major U.S. banks, including J.P. Morgan, are also due this week.
And taking a look at oil now, edging lower after 4 straight weekly gains, even as traders follow production threats from natural disasters. Wildfires in Alberta are threatening supplies, as is a hurricane barreling to the U.S. through the Gulf of Mexico. Checking WTI prices right now, down 1% or 91 cents, now trading at $82.25 a barrel.
And looking at Hurricane Beryl, Amy, it just made landfall minutes ago along the Texas coast. Texas Acting Governor Dan Patrick issued a warning for those in the storm's path.
It will be a deadly storm for people who are directly in that path.
Texas Acting Governor Dan Patrick urged people to take shelter ahead of the storm's arrival. Beryl caused devastation last week as it ripped through the Caribbean and Mexico, leaving 9 people dead. And it's time now for a look at some of the other stories making news in New York and around the world. For that, we're joined by Bloomberg's Michael Barr. Michael, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. A heat advisory in effect in the New York area from 12 p.m. this afternoon until Tuesday at 8 p.m. Temperatures are expected to reach up to 95, but the real feel will be over 100 degrees. Over New Yorkers who don't have air conditioning, there are cooling centers available. And while it has been hot in the New York area, it's nothing like in Las Vegas. Yesterday, the city broke its all-time temperature record by 3 degrees, hitting 120 degrees several times since they started recording temperatures in 1930. This visiting newlywed couple is trying to manage the heat.
Right now, we are sweating.
So we're getting pictures taken outside really quickly, back in the car with aircon, and then the venues are all air conditioned, so we can manage.
Others say it's too hot to even walk down the strip. Meanwhile, Phoenix set a new daily record for the warmest low temperature. It never got below 92 degrees yesterday, and a motorcyclist died from heat exposure while visiting Death Valley National Park, where it hit 128 degrees. Wildfires in the west prompted evacuations and threatened homes. Extreme conditions are fueling at least 21 wildfires in California. One fire in Santa Barbara County exploded over the weekend, burning more than 16,000 acres. Last night, authorities said the fire was 0% contained and within 1 mile of Neverland Ranch, the 2,700-acre former home of Michael Jackson. Closing arguments take place today in the corruption trial of Democratic Senator Bob Menendez of New Jersey. Menendez is accused of taking bribes to benefit foreign interests. 4 NASA volunteers have exited their ground-based home over the weekend after a year-long mission where they lived in a simulated Mars environment. The crew took Mars walks, grew and harvested several vegetables, and maintained their equipment and habitat. They also operated under additional specific stressors a Mars crew would experience, including communication delays with Earth, resource limitations, and isolation. Flight engineer Ross Brockwell took part in the study.
Very grateful to have had this incredible opportunity to live for a year within the spirit of planetary adventure towards an exciting future.
2 additional missions are planned for 2025 and 2027. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Karen.
All right, Michael Barr, thank you. Time now for the Bloomberg Sports Update with John Stashower. John, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. Red Sox and Yankees, arch rivals, going opposite ways. Boston has won 16 of its last 22 games. The Yanks, since mid-June, are 5-20 without a 2-game winning streak. They have failed to win any of their last 7 series, and 2 of those series losses against the Sox, who won 3-0 in the Bronx. They hit solo home runs in each of the last 3 innings. 2 of those homers hit by Yankee killer Rafael Devers. The Yanks, who scored 14 runs Saturday, came back with only 4 hits Sunday. They're 3 games behind the Orioles, who won 6-3 in Oakland. The Mets and Pittsburgh, scoreless game through 7 innings. The Mets broke through, then fell behind. Bottom of the 8th, they rallied in the 9th.
The 1-1. Line drive left field, falling in, base hit by Lindor. Gamble scores, Bader rounding third, he scores. The throw is cut off on the way to the... The Mets take the lead with their backs against the wall or against Aroldis Chapman. Lindor drives in 2, and the Mets have a 3-2 lead in the 9th.
At the final, WCBS The Call, Mets are now 44-44. They'll be represented in next week's All-Star game by Pete Alonso. He'll also be in the Home Run Derby. 32 first-time All-Stars were named, 19 guys under the age of 27, including Pittsburgh's Paul Skeens, who just a year ago had just finished pitching in the College World Series, is about to become the first pick of the draft. He began this season in the minors. Wimbledon begins the second week today in women's singles. 8 of the top 10 seeds are out, including the top 3 second-seeded Coco Gauff, who burst onto the scene as a 15-year-old 5 years ago when she reached the 4th round, has still not advanced further at Wimbledon. Coco upset by fellow American Emma Navarro. Men's side American Tommy Paul is into the quarterfinals, as are Yannick Sinner and Carlos Alcaraz. 25-year-old Davis Thompson won the John Deere in Illinois. He shot 28 under par, won by 4. It's his first PGA Tournament win. John Stashower, Bloomberg Sports. Karen and Amy.
Coast to coast on Bloomberg Radio, nationwide on Sirius XM, and around the world on Bloomberg.com and the Bloomberg Business app. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
Several influential congressional Democrats have been talking about getting Joe Biden off the ticket. They said privately just yesterday that they want the president to step aside as the party's White House nominee as the president enters a pivotal week for his teetering reelection campaign. At the same time, though, there's a Bloomberg News Morning Consult poll out that shows Biden is actually narrowing the gap with Donald Trump in some swing states. We're joined now by Bloomberg's Gregory Cordy. He's going to sort all of this out for us. And Gregory, more defections from the Democratic Party, at least on the House side. What are you hearing?
Yeah, so the numbers mounted over the weekend, as you said. The names that jumped out to me were Jerry Nadler of New York and Adam Smith of Washington. These are Democrats who chair committees and prominent committees in the House when the Democrats are in power. And so, those are it's sort of a drip, drip, drip for Joe Biden of every day a few more Democrats. It's by no means the majority of his party, but it's got to be concerning as the president heads into his convention next month, trying to unite the party around him.
Now, we're hearing a lot from the Democrats in the House, perhaps, but what are you hearing from Democrats in the Senate?
Yeah, the Senate is always a kind of a different animal, and always on every issue a little bit more circumspect. So we have heard that Mark Warner of Virginia is trying to gather a group of senators there to also put pressure on Biden to step aside and let somebody else run for the Democratic nomination. But remember, Joe Biden served in the Senate for decades and has a lot of deep friendships there and a lot of deep alliances there. So we might expect fewer senators to make that call.
Now, this is happening at the same time as that new Bloomberg Morning Consult poll shows that the president's narrowing that gap in swing states. What does that poll indicate for Biden's staying power, even with the Democrats pushing back?
Yeah, I mean, one way to read this poll is that while this is the current obsession with the Beltway class in Washington, among journalists, among members of his own party. Certainly, Republicans are having a field day with this issue. Outside the Beltway, voters are always focused on somewhat different issues. And remember that also in the past month, Donald Trump was convicted of 34 felonies. Voters have not forgotten that. And so what our Bloomberg News Morning Consult poll of these 7 swing states found was that Joe Biden is only 2 points behind across those 7 states. He's up a little bit more in some, Wisconsin and Michigan notably, and he's down in others, most concerning for him, Pennsylvania. But this is the best poll that he's had since we've been doing this series of polls beginning last October. And so it did give Biden and his allies a little bit of a boost over the weekend, and thinking that maybe he can stick with this. Of course, we're going to want to see more evidence of this. You never want to look at just one poll in isolation. Even our own poll, I'll say, is just one data point, and we're going to want to see if this trend continues in more polling going forward.
And briefly, you mentioned the Democratic National Convention in August. How does this set the table for that?
Yeah, we'll see if we even get there, because one of the things that Democrats had talked about even before the debate, even before we got into this discussion about Joe Biden's age and his mental acuity, Democrats had planned to perhaps nominate him virtually by some sort of online roll call in late July. And that was originally to get on the ballot in Ohio, which had an early ballot deadline. Now, if they follow through with that plan, it could also serve the purpose of nominating Biden outside the convention early to put a stop to all of this discussion before they even get to the convention.
You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak Today, your morning brief on the stories making news from Wall Street to Washington and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed at 6 a.m. Eastern each morning on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
You can also listen live each morning starting at 5 a.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg 1130 in New York, Bloomberg 99.1 in Washington, Bloomberg 106.1 in Boston, and Bloomberg 960 in San Francisco.
Our flagship New York station is also available on your Amazon Alexa devices. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130.
Listen coast to coast on the Bloomberg Business app, Sirius XM Channel 119, the iHeartRadio app, and on Bloomberg.com. I'm Amy Morris.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day right here on Bloomberg Daybreak.